أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. And welcome back to another episode of 110 Lessons for Life from the teachings of the Commander of the Faithful, Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib. May God's peace and blessings be upon them. Today in our discussion, in our review of the speeches and the words of wisdom of the Commander of the Faithful, we want to look at the topic of spiritual negligence, what is deemed in the books of ethics as Ghaflah. Now, before we go into the hadith and a brief discussion and an understanding of the tradition, we do want to remind ourselves and understand the fact that forgetfulness is sometimes a blessing from Allah, from God. And obviously at other times when it takes an extreme form, which is what we will see in the tradition today, that this level of forgetfulness is something which has been reprimanded, and those who have this level of negligence have been castigated within the Quran and within the prophetic traditions. How is forgetfulness good? Well, we know that, for example, if a husband and a wife, if a couple were to lose their child, let's say a newborn infant were to be born with medical complications, or maybe they had a child who grew into be a young man or a young woman, and they were maybe coming home from school and they had an accident and passed away, that the grief would obviously be intense for that mother and father. And I'm sure for the first month, for the first year, they would definitely remember that child on a frequent basis. But as time goes on, they would slowly begin to not entirely forget about that child, but they would, it would be in the back of their mind. And this is actually a blessing from God, because had forgetfulness not been there, then that mother and father in this example would have lived a life of grief and sorrow, lamenting over the death of their child. But because we are given this blessing of being forgetful in certain things at certain times, this actually is a blessing of God. On the other hand, when we take that to the extreme of forgetfulness, which is the topic of this tradition for today, we see that that is where the problems of humanity lie. And so before we go into the explanation, let us have a listen to the hadith and then come back and review this statement and tradition from the Commander of the Faithful, where he says the following statement: how many spiritually heedless people there are who clothe themselves in some clothing, and that becomes their own burial shroud. And how many spiritually heedless people there are who build a house to reside in, however it becomes their own grave. Without a doubt, the Commander of the Faithful has spoken the truth in this statement. He talks about the fact of the extreme form of negligence, of forgetfulness, and that is forgetfulness of the world to come, of the day of reckoning, the day of judgment, and our responsibility that we will have on that day. And he talks about the fact that how many times there are people who clothe themselves in beautiful clothing, in garments, who will spend thousands of dollars on an outfit, on a suit, or on a purse, or on a pair of shoes. And not just one or two pairs of shoes, but we see that many times women will have 20, 30, 40 pairs of shoes perhaps. They'll buy the most expensive purses and handbags. They'll wear the most expensive designer outfits. And men the same. Men are no different in this regard perhaps. And as the Commander says, that they clothe themselves in these beautiful clothings, but their clothing ends up being their own burial shroud. And how many times we've seen and we have experienced perhaps that we build palatial mansions, beautiful homes with indoor swimming pools, with an entertainment room, with a man cave, with all of these luxuries. And then that house is nothing other than our own grave. Not physically, but at a metaphysical level, that we have forgotten the day of judgment. We have forgotten our own understanding that we are not immortal beings, that we will all die one day. And so the Commander of the Faithful, indirectly in this tradition, he tells us and he shows us the fact that if we want to be spiritually awoken, if we want to be aware of our surroundings, if we want to come out of the state of negligence that we're in, the state of Ghaflah as we find ourselves in many times, that one of the best ways is to reflect and think about death. That when we die, no matter we are a millionaire or we're a middle class earning individual or family, that we will all be buried with the same burial shroud. We will all be put in the same grave, the same measurement, the same size, the same coffin. No king or prince or ruler, within the tradition of Islam at least, can they say that they have For example, being buried with their car or their home or their gold or their jewelry or their whatever it is that they have. The burial shroud for each and every single Muslim is a white piece of cloth, just as we wear when we go on the pilgrimage to Mecca. And that shows us and is a reminder to us when we're alive that our outcome will be one and the same as of every other Muslim on the face of this earth. And as we conclude and as we try to spiritually awaken ourselves, we remind ourselves of death. Yes, it's a bit macabre, it's a bit, people might say, well, you're becoming goth. Obviously not. But we have to keep death in mind. We have to realize that we will all die one day, and that we will be brought back to Allah in a way of as we were born, and all we will carry with us on that day are our actions, our good deeds, and that all of the fame, the fortune, the glory, the name, the power, everything that we had, it would be removed and stripped away from us. As we conclude, we remind the viewers that if you have not yet subscribed to our channel, please do take a moment to subscribe, to like this video, and also to offer your comments below. We will do our best to respond to any questions or queries that you have. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.